Hey, y'all. Welcome to the Reckless Optimist podcast. My name is Megan. I'm a family nurse practitioner with a deep passion for mental health. On this show, we showcase guests who have shown tenacity, grit, mental strength, and who embody the word resilience. A quick disclaimer before we start. This show is not a substitute for mental diagnosis or treatment. We do recommend that if you're struggling with your own emotional well-being, you see a mental health provider. I'm so excited that you guys are here. Let's get into it. Hey, everyone. Today on the podcast, we have Kenny. Kenny is a super cool guy with a super cool story. I first learned about Kenny by listening to his story on a different podcast called the Begin Again podcast and thought he was a really interesting person. He grew up as an obese child and was kind of bullied, picked on, kind of had a rough upbringing, and ultimately got gastric bypass in his late 20s. And his relationship with alcohol took a turn for the worse after that. And he describes his whole experience of that condition getting worse and then ultimately finding sobriety and recovery and all of the cool things he's done now in recovery, including being an ultra runner and a fitness guru. He is big into the DDP yoga, which I learned about in our episode, which sounds really cool. He is a locomotive engineer and a personal trainer. He definitely is someone that I learned a lot from this episode, and I'm so excited for you guys to hear his story. Let's get into it. Hey, everyone. Help me welcome Kenny to the podcast.
Great. Excited to be here.
I'm so glad that you're here. Me and you know each other through the online recovery community. I reached out to you actually to come on the show because I listened to your episode with our friend Gary, who has the podcast Begin Again podcast. And I listened to your episode and thought we had some stuff in common. You're also an ultra runner and you had a really cool story. Are you friends with Gary? How did you get on his show?
Gary actually got on Reddit last year. He was on Reddit for about 2 seconds and saw a post that I had made in the ultramarathoning subreddit. And I said I was 7 years sober and just ran my first 50 miler. And he was like, I got to get this guy on my show. And so he reached out to me, but he wasn't on Reddit very long before he found me. And I'm always on Reddit.
Yeah, that's so funny. It's funny how the world works and like the relationships and people we encounter. You know, sometimes I feel like the world works in our favor, you know?
Certainly. Yeah. It certainly does in recovery.
Absolutely. So we're going to start our episode out like we do every time with a quote. And since you were an ultra runner, I picked a quote from one of my favorite ultra running books. It's called Ultra Marathon Man by Dean Karnesius. Have you read this?
I have not.
Okay. You need to add it to your list. So I read this book probably 2006, 2007, somewhere around there. It's when it came out. It came out a long time ago. I mean, it's almost 20 years ago. And I had only run marathons at this point. I read this book and it inspired me to run my first ultramarathon. Like he inspired me so much. And at that point, I'd only run I think maybe 1 or 2 marathons. And so I decided to sign up for an 8-hour ultramarathon. Never ran one before, didn't even train, just was like, let's just see what happens. I was 23 years old. And so I go to this event and I win. I win this event, my debut. It's because I'm so stubborn. I ran 45 miles in 8 hours. And the whole time, Dean Karnesius was in my head. He is what got me through that ultramarathon. And since then, you know, I've enjoyed ultras ever since. But the quote is, struggling and suffering are the essence of a life worth living. If you're not pushing yourself beyond the comfort zone, if you're not demanding more for yourself, expanding and learning as you go, you're choosing a numb existence. You're denying yourself an extraordinary trip. What does that mean to you?
I have to agree. Our brains and our bodies are thirsty for more. And I spent a good portion of my life giving into self-indulgence when what I really should have been doing was exercising my body, exercising my mind, pushing myself out of my comfort zone, because that's the only way that we get stronger. And that's a principle that I picked up quite a bit later in life, but it's one that I'm embracing now. Yeah, certainly. Without pushing ourselves beyond our limits, how are we ever going to get out of that numb existence?
Yeah, I think he said it so beautifully too. And there's a lot of correlation there with sobriety. But I think in terms of racing, when you toe up to a race, that is the ultimate act of vulnerability. You could fail, you could fall, you could injure yourself, you could let people see your weakness. And I think so many people are afraid of that. And sobriety is like that too in recovery. So I think it's super correlational. I also think that for me, learning to sit in the pain cave has been transformative and to not shy away from the discomfort. However, I'm learning more about that mentally now. So learning to sit with my emotions, meditating, that type of thing, not just physical pain, but a little bit of quote unquote mental pain can also be really helpful as well. Do you do those things as well, meditate?
Oh, yeah, certainly. That was one of the biggest principles they taught me in recovery was meditation, mindfulness, internalization, and understanding, going through my day and taking apart what worked and what didn't work. Yeah, all the
Yeah.
time.
Absolutely. Well, whenever you're ready, I would love to hear your story. Just take us back to the beginning.
Okay, well, I grew up in Washington State. That's where I live now. I was an obese kid. I was bullied a lot. I had a really poor self-image, and I grew up as an obese young man and adolescent, and I struggled with mental health a lot because I always felt I wasn't good enough, and I turned to alcohol as just kind of a way to escape. I mean, in the beginning, it was a way to socialize and stuff like that in college, but alcohol was a way for me to escape. Drugs as well, but mostly for me, it was alcohol. And I had gastric bypass surgery when I was about 28. I chose the nuclear option to lose weight. And when the weight came off, I started drinking more alcohol. I was getting more drunk than I was used to getting when I was a heavy guy. Body weight protects you. The more cells in your body, the more you have to absorb the alcohol that you drink. And so as my body was shrinking, I was getting much more drunk off much fewer drinks. Plus, I was dumping undigested alcohol into the later stages of my intestines because they reroute your guts basically when you have gastric bypass surgery. So I developed a drinking problem that was quite a bit worse than it was before I had surgery. And it just kind of spiraled out of control. And I would go through periods of time where I would say, I want to quit drinking. I feel like I can't control this. And I would stop for a week or a couple of months. I actually strung together 14 months one time on my own. And I always came back to the thought, like, I feel like I have this taken care of. I feel like I did 14 months, so I should be able to control my drinking. And that wasn't true. The last bout of drinking that lasted a couple of years, I hit a lot of rock bottoms, a lot of really humiliating, demoralizing rock bottoms in my life. And I knew it was time in the last year. The problem is that in order to quit drinking, you have to quit drinking. And that was a really, really scary thing for me. I was afraid to live without alcohol. I was horrified at a life without alcohol. And alcohol became my daily thing. I drank every day. I blacked out 3 or 4 times a week, and I terrorized my family. And I was not the person that I wanted to be. I felt like the me that I am today, he was locked inside, and there was somebody else driving me, controlling my behavior. So I was on vacation at home. It was a staycation. I had bought myself a case of beer. It was my favorite brand of beer, 24 beers, and I was going to ration them out every day of the week of vacation. It was going to be 3 or 4 beers a night, nice little nightcap. I had big plans, and I always had big plans when it came to how I was going to control my drinking. But I put my kid to bed at 8 o'clock, and then I opened the first beer, and by 11 o'clock, I had had 19 beers. And that was the moment that I said to myself, Kenny, your life is no longer manageable. And I reached out to a friend. It was my friend's wife, actually, and she was in recovery. And I said, I need help. And she said, I'll come and pick you up in the morning. I'm going to take you to a meeting. Okay, but it's going to be all right. And I picked up my phone and I recorded a message to myself, which I don't have any memory of recording. And I said, I want to be different from this day forward. I want to stop. I want help. I don't ever want to be drunk again. And she took me to that meeting, and that 12-step meeting, and there was a sign on the wall that said, you never ever have to be alone again. And what a relief. Like, how did they know how alone I was? How did they know how empty and alone I was inside? And I was home. I mean, like, I was so ready to quit. I was so ready to be let out of this cage. I was willing to do whatever it took. And the principles they taught me in recovery really weren't that hard to wrap my head around. Here's the book, read it. Hasn't changed much in 80 years. Get yourself a sponsor, work the steps, keep going to meetings, be honest, be thorough and rigorous in the way that we have you do this. But just open your ears and and keep coming back. And that was it. I mean, like, it really was that simple. It wasn't easy, but as long as I was willing to do what it took and to not take that first drink, it really was all laid out right before me. All I had to do was just work the steps. And so, I admired my sponsor so much. My sponsor was this world traveler. He was this really neat guy. He was always taking my calls from all around the world, and Hong Kong and Portugal and Iceland. And I just thought, man, that is so neat. Like, I want what he has. I want to do cool things like he does. And I want people to look at me the way I look at him. And I couldn't just get what he had. It had to be something that was meaningful to me. So I gained weight in recovery. I'd put on, 30 pounds because, they tell you to keep chocolate by the bed and for those nighttime alcohol cravings. And I really was shoveling it in, and I put on a lot of weight. So I thought, I really need to change direction on this. This isn't sustainable anymore. One of my childhood heroes that I used to follow is a wrestler named Diamond Dallas Page. And he started this yoga program, and he helped people rehabilitate their bodies. And he helped Jake the Snake Roberts, who's a pro wrestler, a very famous Hall of Famer. And he helped him get clean and sober, and he helped him rehabilitate his body with this DDP yoga. And I heard Jake on a podcast, and I was like, hey, that's cool. That sounds good for me. If it's good for him, it's good for me. So I started doing the workouts, and I started, following the eating plan, and the weight came off. But it really just put me at the perfect place that I could do basically whatever I wanted physically. My body hadn't been too terribly damaged. And that's something that was really neat about living in recovery, is that no matter how far you have gone when you've been drinking, your body really does want to heal itself. And, you can recover physically, not just mentally, when you're living in recovery. And so the yoga really helped basically just put me at the Mark 1 Mod 0. And I could go anywhere I wanted. I was recognized as one of DDP Yoga's success stories, and I was flown down to Georgia, and I got to meet Dallas, and they gave me a wrestling belt with my name on it. And I'm like, what neat thing can I do next? And so I thought, I've always wanted to run an ultra marathon. I always wanted to be one of those people who ran ultra marathons. And you talk about the book Ultra Marathon Man, and I'm actually surprised I haven't read it yet. But there were books that I had read about ultra running, Born to Run, and David Goggins' book. This is the coolest thing that I've ever heard, that people actually do this. And then when I found out that regular people did it, I was like, hey, I'm a regular guy. Boom. I fit right in. And all I had to do was embrace the principles that I learned in recovery. I got a book. I didn't know how to train for an ultra marathon. I didn't know how to run. I wasn't a runner. I had done almost no running in my entire life. And my first marathon, I ran the same day as my first ultra marathon. So I got the book. I read about the principles that I needed to embrace. I made my own training plan. I learned everything that I could about ultra running and about how somebody conditions their body to be able to handle it. And I just ground it out. And the next thing I know, 50K. And it was in less than 6 months. We're talking about from no running to 50K was less than 6 months. And I really, as long as, you don't have some kind of knee or back injuries, if you want to do an ultra marathon, hey, it's possible. It's totally possible for any normal person. You don't have to be a runner. So, I mean, it's amazing that the places that you can be taken, if you embrace those principles that come from recovery, and because those are the things that keep bringing me back to it, that I have been able to achieve all these amazing things, set all these lofty goals, and hit them one day at a time just by embracing those principles. So that's Kenny's story in a nutshell.
That's amazing. Wow. Such an inspiring story. I think self-esteem, confidence, they come from experiencing adversity and accomplishment, right? Confidence is something that's earned. It's not given to you. So you had to earn yours, and you did. And I think that's such a cool part of your story. I have some follow-up questions. So you are how many years sober?
8.5 this week.
8.5. Awesome. And the part about you learning to run later in life, and you weren't an athlete when you were younger, is that right?
Well, definitely not an athlete. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was a couch potato.
Yeah, I think that's so cool. What are your running goals moving forward?
Well, I still have the 100K to tackle. I was able to run the 50 miler last year, and I aimed for the 100K, but my hydration strategy was off. I didn't account for heat or humidity, and I started getting really bad cramps, muscle spasms that I had to drop out at 44 miles. And that was another hurdle to get over was cutting myself a break and forgiving myself for training for 9 months and not finishing what I set out to do. I mean, because, it is what it is. You can't always finish them all. And 44 miles is a long way.
Long way.
So I definitely have to get the 100K out of the way. Once we send my son off to college, I think my schedule will free up enough so that I can start planning to run my first 100-miler, because that's definitely in my sights.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm realistically taking those incremental stepping stones. So 100K is the next one that I really want to tackle.
That's amazing. And that's 62 miles, correct?
That's right. Yeah, 62 miles.
Yeah. I wanted to talk a little bit about the gastric bypass. So when I was in graduate school, we learned that patients who go through gastric bypass are at an increased risk for alcohol use disorder. And I think this is multifactorial. One is, the absorption of the alcohol is problematic, right? You're absorbing a lot more than you were before directly into, your liver. And the other part is, do these patients already have, addiction issues? Did they have a food addiction? And then they're just swapping that out for another type of substance that can numb them out, whether that be alcohol or drugs. So you do see a lot of incidents of that. When you were getting your gastric bypass, did you have to do any mental health counseling or anything before that?
Absolutely. They sent me right down to a counselor and a clinical psychologist, and I was diagnosed with binge eating. Probably wasn't a surprise to any of the medical staff that sent me there. Like, oh, binge eating, huh? Well, that's probably why you want to get gastric bypass. I mean, I can't imagine anybody who wants to get gastric bypass who does not have some kind of an eating disorder. But I'm not a doctor. But I mean, I would say they probably fit in the mold that way. But I can agree, psychologically and physiologically, you're at a major risk when you get gastric bypass. And I don't think that if they had communicated it to me, I wasn't really paying attention. I just wanted to not be a slave to food like I was before. And the binge eating has never gone away. It's something that I have to manage every day, just like the alcoholism. It is a chronic condition. It's a mental obsession that I have. And I would imagine that a large portion of the people who pursue weight loss surgery, they struggle with that for life. Yeah, and I've read about it. I mean, it's definitely a known phenomenon in the medical community about the connection between weight loss surgery and alcoholism or drug addiction.
Yeah. Yeah. From a medical standpoint, I was curious, did they screen you for your alcohol intake before the procedure? Was there any discussion about the higher risk you have with alcohol use disorder following the surgery, anything like that?
Not really. I mean, if they did ask me how much alcohol I was drinking, I'm sure I didn't tell them the truth. I never gave my doctor a fair shake until I got sober, and I came clean about how much I had been drinking. And I don't hide things from my doctor like I used to. I mean, I do my best to be as truthful as I can with my doctor now because things are so important. And now that I train like an athlete, it's kind of necessary. Yeah, if they were telling me that, I wasn't listening. I was in my 20s, and I was very immature for somebody even that age. And I think that substance abuse kept me from maturing a lot in my younger years, because since I've gotten sober, I've learned so much, I've achieved so much in my life, and it's like all I want to do is learn more. I want to go back to school. I want to do this and that. I actually just got certified as a personal trainer last week. I earned my NASM certification, and so I never had that drive before when I was treating my trauma with alcohol and with food. I didn't have the drive to do those things, to learn these things, and to achieve my goals, or to even set goals, quite frankly.
Yeah. That's interesting what you were talking about with being honest with your doctor. I think a lot of people are not honest with their doctor, and maybe it's because of the fear of what goes in their chart. But I think being fully honest, the benefit you get from being honest outweighs any risk of anything in your chart. So it's always good to be honest. And even in school, they teach you whatever the patient tells you in terms of what they're drinking, multiply that by 3. And that's probably what they're drinking. But yeah, I mean, depending on, your alcohol use, that can really interfere with medications and treatment and all of that. So it's always good to be honest with your provider.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with that. If anybody's listening to this and they're struggling with drinking, you're really rolling the dice if you're not being upfront and honest with your healthcare provider.
Yeah, because they want to help you for sure. I love the part of your story where it was the last day you drank. What day is that? if you don't mind me asking?
It was November 2nd of 2016.
Okay. That you recorded that memo to yourself. So do you ever go back and listen to that?
Oh, yeah, it's on YouTube. You can actually go and put my name in and see the whole video. Because
Wow.
my story's been picked up, but like my physical transformation through DDP yoga was so shocking on Reddit that journalists picked up my story and were writing. So it's been in like Newsweek and stuff like that. So all of those news outlets have like links to that video of when I said enough was enough. And it's so weird. It's so weird to watch today. I have zero memory. My face is all swollen. I'm like 75 pounds heavier. And the look of desperation, that look of I need help. I want help. Please, somebody help me. I am dying. I'm a dying man. I mean, it's pathetic, and we all are when we hit rock bottom. But that guy's me. And I love that guy. I would do anything for him because he still lives up here. And he's part of that chronic condition. And I don't hate that guy. I love him because he is me, no matter who looks back in the mirror today.
Yeah. It's really, really beautiful. So that day that you recorded the memo, you went to an AA meeting. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So did you do a 12-step program for that first year? Kind of describe your first year to us.
Well, the first year was like, it was a meeting every day. They told me, they were like, hey, 90 and 90. And I got a sponsor right off the bat. And he did not take shit off of me. I mean, he was like, if I missed one meeting, he's like, you're going to need to go to 2 meetings tomorrow. And I'd be like, a meeting every day? This is too much, man. I can't. You're asking me to do too much. He's like, well, you drank every day and you were drunk for like 6 hours at a time. So you don't have a whole lot of excuses. First thing he asked me was, are you willing to go to any lengths to stay sober? And I was. I said I was, and I was. And I was like, okay, fine. I did say that. Yeah, that first year, and I wanted to do something about my weight and about my physique in that first year. And I said, yeah, I'm doing great. I got like 90 days in. I got my coin and I'm going to these meetings. I want to go to the gym. And my sponsor said, well, let's pump the brakes here. You really ought to be focusing on your recovery and shouldn't be adding a bunch of these other things. You can do what you want, and I know that you will. But if you want to stay sober, you really shouldn't be adding a whole bunch of extra complicated things like getting into some big fitness program in that first year. And he was totally right about that. And he said, you can even gain weight if you have to. If that helps you, if you need to go out and have a pizza with everything on it to stay sober today, then do it. And I needed somebody to tell me that. And maybe I self-destructed a little bit with food. Well, not self-destructed. I medicated with food there in that first, 5 or 6 months. But I did work the steps. I did exactly what they said in the book. I filled out the inventory, the notebook, and I wrote all those crappy feelings I'd been feeling about so-and-so from the 3rd grade, and I've been holding it in all these years. And then I had to read it all out one line at a time to my sponsor, to another person, and then I had to let that shit go. I had to let every single one of those things go first before I could even begin to clean up the mess that I had. I had to fix the internal, all the stuff that was going on up here so I could stop seething at the world and the people and the principles. And then when I had a thorough house cleaning, I made that amends list. And there was stuff on there that I was never going to do. I was never going to make amends to this person or that person. But I did the easy ones first. And they weren't even that easy. But then I got kind of good at it. And I was like, you know what? Actually, everybody's being real receptive. And not everybody was receptive. Some of it was real hard. But I finally made it through that amends list. And, there's something else to be said about those hard amends where people are like, I'm not really interested in hearing anything you have to say. You did what you did. And in the book, they say, you've made your demonstration. It's water over the dam. And water over the dam really resonated with me because I associated it with water under the bridge, but it's not. A dam is when ancient man had to try and stop the flow of a river so they could collect all the water that they could have. And the more water they could have, the more food they could grow, and the more children they could have, and the more it could hold their life together. And what a great metaphor for the addict and the alcoholic, that we want to collect as much as we can. We want to have as much as we can get a hold of. And we really struggle with the idea of knowing that something is going to go over the top and we're never going to get it back. And in order to stay sober, in order to live in recovery, I had to learn to accept that water is going to go over the dam. Despite my best efforts to intervene, I'm not going to get it back. And I have to be okay with that. And that's what living in moderation is all about. So that first year, I really did the full inside job that they taught me to do in AA. And I still go to AA meetings. I mean, certainly not as intensely as I went in that first year, but I mean, I was militant about it. I was serious about it. And I went all the time, even when I didn't really have the time. And I kept up the meetings even during COVID, even during those hard years when everybody had to shift online. And all of a sudden we had like Zoom bombers and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
like I did the deal, and I believe it. I believe that I keep doing this. I believe if I keep showing up and reading the book and working with others, that I get to keep all this stuff, that the water isn't going to go over the dam, that I get to keep all these things that I've accumulated in recovery. And it's been such a fantastic adventure that I just can't wait for the next adventure.
Yeah, AA does a really good job with like the structure, discipline, and patience that you can apply to anything that's hard in your life. But then ultimately, it's about the community. I think that's what gets people sober and maybe ultimately keeps people sober is the feeling that they're not alone, that they don't have to isolate anymore. Because that feeling of, well, it's just me, I'm the only one suffering with this in the whole world, furthers the shame and the guilt and that spiral. So I think that they do a really good job with that sense of community.
Yeah, and it's not a magic pill, but it's a magic formula, and they've got it. And not all groups have it, and you're not always going to walk into a meeting and it's going to resonate with you, or you're going to have a rapport. And some of them are just terrible meetings. But and it doesn't work for everybody. does not have a monopoly on recovery, but it worked for me, and it resonated with me, and the principles and the people and the shitty coffee. It's like, you keep this stuff coming, and this is the good stuff. This is going to make me well.
So that first year, even the first week when you got sober, it sounds like you had a spontaneous sobriety moment. It wasn't a planned thing. Did you have withdrawal symptoms? Did you have cravings? When did those cravings go away? Kind of describe that part.
No, I didn't have withdrawals, and I'm lucky with the volume I was drinking that I didn't have withdrawals because, I quit cold turkey, and I did not give a medical professional an opportunity to evaluate me, which I highly recommend if anybody's considering getting sober cold turkey. I recommend you get a doctor to make that assessment first before you do that, because I could have died. But that's not what I did. And I was a bit on what they call the pink cloud. I felt like I had just gotten out of a bad relationship. I was so excited to go to the meetings, and I'm like, this is great. It's just like I feel like I'm me for the first time in years. But then I had this odd thing that doesn't quite compute in my memory is I remember having these feelings where I was thinking, I'm good here. I'm actually, because I work for the railroad and I travel and stay out of town in a hotel. And I thought, when I'm in the out of town hotel, I'll just drink there. And I'm like, why were you thinking that when you knew you were never going to drink again? So like the addiction, the obsession of the mind is always at work. And that's why I have these memories of thinking those thoughts. But that went away pretty quick. I wanted to be sober, and I'm glad to be sober, and I don't feel those feelings anymore. But yeah, the mental obsession, it took a while to get rid of. And I would be in a panic sometimes walking through grocery stores, through the beer aisle, or, walk past alcohol, and I would have to leave and call my sponsor immediately because I wouldn't know what to do. So it was an uphill struggle in certain aspects in the beginning, in that first week, where I was afraid that my sobriety was threatened and I needed to do what they told me to do. And I mean, hey, they gave me the list of numbers when I first showed up. And they said, if you feel like you are going to drink, call us. We don't put our numbers on this list for no reason. We want you to call us because it helps us stay sober. And we're ready to take your call so we can talk you out of drinking. Okay, but if you don't call us, we can't help you in between these meetings. They were right. And luckily, my sponsor was always picking up the phone. And that made me feel better. And it's not magic. It's just like, hey, if you want to quit, if you want to be sober, reaching out to another alcoholic is a very powerful agent to the mind. And it doesn't always work, but it definitely doesn't work if you don't reach out.
Yeah. It's so interesting what you're talking about with the thoughts that you had about, well, I'm in another town, maybe it won't even count, drinking. But, I think what the key there is like, those are just intrusive thoughts. Do not attach yourself to those thoughts. Like let them come in and let them roll out. You are not your thoughts. I love the idea that, you're not responsible for that first thought, but the second one you are. So just don't attach to that and just know that they're going to kind of come and go. And then, like you explained, over time, those intrusive thoughts get like a dimmer. They go less and less and less, and then eventually maybe all the way away. I mean, even now I'm 6 years sober. I don't have any cravings, but I almost get like a flashback. I was at the airport the other day and I was like, oh, I used to sit at that bar and drink before the flight. And it wasn't like, oh, I need to drink, but it kind of shook me a little bit, you know? I
Oh,
just
big.
didn't have to attach to that thought.
Yeah, and that's good. That's good to give yourself a break from something like that, to know that it's coming, and then when it does happen, to, give yourself leave to break free from it. I've definitely had those fleeting feelings that, what would happen if I just did this? What would happen if I just had one beer? And I mean, for me, it always comes back to, well, where would I get the other 23 beers from? So why would I have one beer? That's stupid.
That's so relatable.
Yeah,
So
no, it's
relatable.
just
What's the biggest challenge you've faced in sobriety?
the desire to go out and do things on my own. Yeah, the desire to do things my own way. I mean, I always wanted to do things my own way. I want to be in control. I've always wanted to be in control. I'm a control freak, and the idea that I'm not in control of my own drinking is that's one less thing that I'm not in control of. But something we have to accept on day one, that we're powerless over alcohol, and so. I have to keep reminding myself that. That's why we say one day at a time. This isn't like a permanent fix and poof, you're cured. And if any rehab tells you, any listeners, there's a rehab that says you're cured when you walk out of here, run. They are just trying to get your money. Believe me, addiction is a chronic condition that has to be managed every single day. I mean, I don't ever think about drinking. I don't ever have the desire to drink. The feeling has completely left me. But what is still inside, like a boot on my chest, is the constant desire to get drunk. I want to get drunk every minute of every day, and I can still feel it, and I am still obsessed with it. And that's why I don't want to drink, because if I drink, I have to get drunk. I don't have a choice. So that's what I keep coming back to, is that I have to keep doing this. I believe that I keep doing this program, it will work for me, and I can have any other goal in my life. I can have power over just about anything else in my life, people not included. But I can have power over things like conquering a 50-mile race. I can have power over losing 50 pounds of body fat, and doing things that I never thought possible. Going back to school and getting a personal trainer certification. One thing I don't, ability to control my drinking and have power over alcohol.
Yeah, I think it's interesting what you're talking about, the feeling that you want to get drunk every day. You could probably sub that word drunk out for escape. Is that right? Like you just want to escape your feelings, correct?
Escapism. I mean, and that's why they came up with that word. People wanted to escape from the drudgeries of life. And I have my own little devices. I can pound Diet Cokes and Coke Zeros just as easily as I was pounding beers. I like to go to YouTube, and I like to watch compilations of TV commercials from the 80s when I was growing up, like from Halloween. And I'm sorry to have to say such a foolish thing that I do, but something, when I'm really hurting and I really want to withdraw and go back to those days when I was a kid and my mother was in the other room cooking and I was on the living room rug and nobody could hurt me and nobody could beat me up and the world didn't matter, I can turn on my iPad and listen to those stupid YouTube commercials about Halloween candy for 20 minutes, and I can just kind of reset that clock, and I can face my day. And those are just the little things. Now, exercising actually is a lot more effective and easier and makes much better neural connections than that. But I still do escape, regardless of whether I drink or whether I think about drinking. And for some people, their escapism is destructive. For the people who are still suffering, it's alcohol or drugs or both. And for the people in recovery, they might be, medicating with food like I did in that first 9 months until I said enough's enough. But I find that the escapism that I resort to nowadays is certainly maybe not constructive, but less destructive than the things that I was resorting to.
Yeah, we call that harm reduction. So healthier forms of escapism is perfectly fine. For me, it's running, obviously, meditation, reading, cold therapy, hiking, walking. I like the YouTube idea, though. I need to look up some stuff on there. I was a big fan of Full House.
If it works, it works, I mean, and it's not hurting anybody.
That's actually adorable. I wanted to ask you about your relationship with your kids. Now, how many kids do you have?
Just one. He's 17.
Just 17. So how has that relationship changed in recovery?
On its face, I wouldn't have thought that anything changed, but he was a lot more withdrawn when I was drinking. He was a lot more standoffish. I was basically held at arm's length, and he could only really talk to my wife and confide in her, and I wasn't really the person that he went to. And now, taking a look at it objectively, the real change has been just me fixing the things in my own life and having him witness those things, because he's a changed kid. He wants to be more like the stuff that I do. I mean, he picked up athletics, he started lifting weights and putting on muscle, and he's finding himself through having me as an example. It just shocks my breath away, the thought that he would be finding himself and me being the example while I was drinking, and him trying to self-destruct by escaping through drugs and alcohol the way that he saw me doing it. So yeah, I certainly have been setting a better example, and I would like to think that he would do all those things on his own. But I mean, he does see my behavior, and our kids do see our behavior, and it makes a big difference. It makes a big impact on them about what they see.
Yeah. I think that we're not necessarily here to save our children. I think we're here to show our children that we can save ourselves and, being that good example to them. And also not hiding, the failures that we've had, but rather showing them that we've come through these failures. Because the other side of that is this perfectionism where you don't let them see your mistakes or your failures. I think kind of having that open dialogue about, I went through something, but I got through it. And this is how I got through it. And then being a good example moving forward. It's hard though. I mean, we're not perfect people, and we're definitely not perfect parents. And I don't know about you, but being a parent is the hardest job I've ever had in my life. So I don't know if I'm doing it right. I'm figuring it out as I go. I have a 15-year-old, almost 16, and twin 9-year-olds. And so far they're healthy and they're good. But every day I question if I'm doing the right thing,
I try not to compare myself to other parents, because I see other people who are very clearly doing a better job. But comparison is the thief of joy. I'm flying by the seat of my pants. Nobody told me how to be a good parent. And if he really knew how emotionally immature I was when he was born, and for basically all of his life, I mean, maybe it would shock him. But we're all just people, and pretty soon our kids are going to go off and have their own families, and they're going to be just as clueless as we were. So yeah, but I love being a dad. Being a dad, I always thought was my calling. And when my son first came out and I heard him cry, I just started laughing hysterically. It was so overwhelming. Like, this is actually happening. I'm going to have my own little friend. But I wasn't a good dad for a lot of years. I was a drunk. And that's such a scary thought that I could have allowed that to go on one more day. And luckily, all I had to do was just kind of clean up my behavior. There wasn't any lasting. I didn't strike my kid. I didn't do anything to him that so traumatized him that other than just being a wreck in front of him. And I did drive my son around while I was drinking, and it has been very hard for me to forgive myself for that, because I put my son's life at risk. And I used to have nightmares about waking up in the ditch with the windows blown out of the car and my son is dead in the back seat. And that was one of the things that drove me to get sober, was knowing that clock was ticking. And sooner or later, I was going to be in that situation. We do what we can do, but we're all just people. Eventually our kids find out that we were just as clueless when they were born.
I think ultimately when you get sober, you give your kids the gift of presence, right? Fully present with them. Because when you're drinking, you're not. You're distracted. You're in your own head. You're on a completely different wavelength energetically. So that was so beautiful. I love that so much. I love that you have this awesome relationship with your son. We have made it to the lightning round of our episode. So I ask the same 5 questions to every guest and just answer them in 1 to 5 minutes. So the first one is, you're given 3 options. You can shark dive, bungee jump, or skydive. Which one are you choosing?
Shark dive. I hate heights. I hate falling from heights, and I'd rather swim with the sharks outside the cage than bungee jump or skydive.
That is hilarious. Okay, number 2, you're in a simulation. Every time you walk into a room, the same song plays. What's your song?
That's a good one. That is a good question. Across the Universe by the Beatles.
Okay, an oldie, but a goodie. Great answer. Number 3, what's your favorite Disney movie?
Robin Hood.
Oh,
Yeah.
I haven't heard that one yet. That's a really good one.
I always
I like
wanted
that
to
one.
be a hero like Robin Hood, the fox, the cunning fox, and that was always my favorite.
Yeah, well, you're a hero in your own right. You're a sober hero.
That's right. I'm the
For
hero of
sure.
my own story.
Yeah. Definitely are. You're the main character.
That's right.
100%. Number 4, what is something you're obsessed with?
Getting better physically, building my body and making myself more capable to achieve my goals. Yeah, I'm absolutely obsessed. My wife
Wow.
could tell you that. You're obsessed. She says it all the time. So I have to take this all with a grain of salt and dial my goals back because it is my obsession.
I think that's a good obsession to have, though. Last question. What does freedom mean to you?
Just the ability to take a breath. Just the ability to be me and to embrace being me now in this place, in this time. I used to hate being myself. I used to grow up loathing myself and listening to the people who said I was no good for whatever reason and hating on myself for being obese and hating on myself for being a drunk. And freedom to me means the ability to embrace being myself and just being able to live this life and look in the mirror and see, you know what, we turned out okay. That's what freedom is.
That's a great answer. Not to get too existential on you, but I feel like that's the meaning of life is to learn to love ourselves, really. Hearing your story, that's what you did. It was a crazy, wild journey, but you learned to love yourself and it comes through and it's really a beautiful lesson.
Yeah, and I can definitely agree with that. I can see that in the meaning of life is learning to love yourself. I mean, and I love all those parts of me that struggled, that were traumatized, that did bad things. And it's like, those guys are all versions of me. And I like the guy that I am today, but I love those other guys, and they all take up space in my spiritual house, and I look after them. I'm the boss. I look after them today.
That's awesome. Well, I can't thank you enough for coming on. Your story is going to help so many people. So thank you for being open and honest and sharing your story.
Thank you for having me. It's been an honor. And might I say, recoverbrand.com, Gary Menkes has this great brand, Recover, and it's the coolest thing to be able to, to share the message of recovery through some pieces of clothing. I've just like, what a brilliant idea. And so it was his podcast that how we met. And so I'm honored to be able to share this brand.
I love it. He sent me some stuff and I'm obsessed. I ran a race the other day in the sports bra that he sent me and I won. I won the race. So now it's my lucky sports bra.
That's
But the
awesome.
material is amazing. It's super high quality material. Total, like Lululemon almost.
I love the way, because he sent me a hoodie, and I love the way it fits. I mean, it fits exactly the way I like my clothing to fit. I'm a bit more muscular now than I used to be, and that's exactly what I look for in buying clothing today. And just boom, nailed it 100% the first time. So
Yeah.
I definitely
RCVR.
recover
Yeah.
brand.
Check it out. It's awesome. Awesome stuff. All right. Thank you so much. Bye.